The Hart Trophy race this season, in my opinion, was one of the best in recent memory, and I think it's safe to say no matter who ends up winning the award, whether it's McKinnon, Kucherov, or even somebody like Matthews, Panarin, or Pastrnak, there's going to be a large group of people that are upset with the result. So with that in mind, I thought it would be fun to give you guys my take on the Hart Trophy debate by doing something a little bit different. In this video, I went through all 32 NHL teams and picked out an MVP for each team, and we're going to be ranking them from 32 all the way up until number one being who I would pick to win the Hart Trophy this season. If you guys end up enjoying this video and you want to see more content like this on the channel in the future, then be sure to leave the video a like. That's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want NHL content all year round. And with that being said, let's go ahead and kick things off with number 32, my MVP from the San Jose Sharks, Mikael Granlund. Despite playing in just 69 games, Granlund finished with the 4th highest point total he's finished a season with in his career, with 60 points. Mikael Granlund has always been a pretty solid playmaking center, but I will admit I was really surprised to see Granlund produce at this kind of rate on a very poor San Jose Sharks team without a great supporting cast. He finished the season with a career high 0.696 assists per game, and he got off to a brutal start to the season as well. He had just 1 assist and 1 point through his first 8 games of the season, and from there on out he was pretty much a point per game player for the Sharks. Really strong year from Granlund. You have to imagine with him heading into the final year of his contract, this is a guy that could draw a lot of interest from contending teams, whether it's in the offseason or leading up towards next year's trade deadline. Next up at number 31, I have Joey Daccord, goaltender for the Seattle Kraken. Prior to this season, his career high in games played in a single season was just 8, and that came back in the 2020-21 season as a member of the Ottawa Senators. And then all of a sudden this season with the Kraken, he took the reins as the starting goaltender and played in 50 games, and in those 50 games he was able to come out with a record above 500. Well, NHL 500, of course. He posted a goals against average of just 2.46, a save percentage of .916, and was 15th in the entire NHL in goals saved above expected. His efforts were obviously not enough to get the Seattle Kraken into the postseason, but I think it's safe to say their year would have looked a lot worse had it not been for the emergence of Joey Daccord, because Philip Grubauer looked pretty bad this year. Moving on now to number 30, I have Frank Vatrano as the MVP of the Anaheim Ducks. He was the only player on their roster this season to appear in all 82 games, and he was consistently their most dangerous forward throughout the entire season. Vatrano really exploded this season and put up career highs across the board, 37 goals, shattering his previous career high by 13. His 23 assists were also a career high, and of course his 60 points a career high as well. Similar to what I said about Mikael Granlund earlier in this video, Frank Vatrano is heading into the final year of his contract next season, and his contract is an absolute bargain, just $3.65 million. You have to imagine that if this is a guy the Ducks decide to trade, the return for him could be huge. Next up at number 29, my MVP from the Columbus Blue Jackets is defenseman Zach Werenski. After playing just 13 games last season, missing pretty much the entire year with an injury, I wasn't really sure what to expect from Werenski this season, but he returned from injury and looked fantastic. In 70 games, he averaged almost 24.5 minutes per game, put up a career high 57 points. His defensive impacts definitely took a little bit of a hit, but let's be real, if you're the Columbus Blue Jackets, you're probably more than okay with that, considering the fact that he put up career highs offensively. Werenski is somebody who the Blue Jackets rely on a ton. They use him in basically every situation. He carries a very heavy workload, and for somebody coming off of shoulder surgery, I think he did a damn good job this season. Moving on now to number 28, I have Clayton Keller as the MVP from the Arizona Coyotes. After putting up a career high 86 points last season, his numbers came back down a little bit this season, but was still right there around a point per game with 76 and 78 games. He led the Coyotes in scoring for the 3rd consecutive season. It's the 5th time he's done that in his career. He is the face of this franchise, a franchise that is soon going to be in Utah, which is pretty crazy to think about. I still can't get over that. I feel like you could definitely make a strong case that Connor Ingram was the Coyotes MVP this season, but based off of how the second half of the season went, I decided to give it to Keller. Number 27, we have the Calgary Flames, and you could go a couple of different ways with this one. I personally went with goaltender Jacob Markstrom. Markstrom finished the season with an even record, 23-23-2, a .905 save percentage, and a 2.78 goals against average, but he was actually 3rd in the entire NHL in goals saved above expected. Really interested to see what happens with Markstrom in the offseason. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about Markstrom potentially being traded at this year's deadline. It didn't happen. He made some comments about not being happy with how everything was handled, so to be honest, I'm kind of expecting to see Markstrom in a different uniform next season. I think it's safe to say with the way Markstrom performed this season for Calgary that he bumped his trade value back up quite a bit. Number 26, I decided to go with with Brady Tkachuk as the MVP of the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, the Senators season in terms of team success was pretty disappointing, but individually it was another really strong year for the captain Brady Tkachuk. He finished with a career-high 37 goals, led the Senators in points with 74. If I was a Senators fan, I would feel pretty confident going into the future with Brady Tkachuk as the leader of this team. He's the kind of player who leads by example, wears his heart on his sleeve. Based off of some of the things that he said throughout the season, it's pretty obvious that this is a guy who isn't going to tolerate too many more losing seasons. I think he's going to do everything in his power to right the ship and turn this team around. Moving on now to number 25, I have Travis Konecny as my MVP for the Philadelphia Flyers. I think the real MVP for Philadelphia this season, for the most part, was John Tortorella and how he really reinvented the team defense and the way he had this team playing, bought into his system. I think you can give an honorable mention to Samuel Ersson, but he really faltered down the stretch, as did most of the Philadelphia Flyers team. So I decided to go with Travis Konecny, who finished this season with a career-high 33 goals in 76 games. For a team that struggles to score and struggles to produce offense, Travis Konecny is somebody who carried a pretty heavy workload this season. They relied on him a ton to produce a lot of the offense, especially at even strength. This is a guy who was the leading scorer this season on a Philadelphia Flyers team that for the majority of the year was in a divisional playoff seed. It's just such a shame that they had to go on that brutal stretch to end the season and end up missing the playoffs. No fault to Travis Konecny though. Fantastic season for him in my opinion, and he's one of those guys who I feel like if he was on a different team and maybe a more offensive oriented system, I think he could push, 40 goals and 80 points in a season. Next up at number 24, I have the captain of the Montreal Canadiens, Nick Suzuki, who had the best season of his career, 33 goals, which was a career high, 44 assists, career high, and 77 points, also a career high. On top of his career highs offensively, he continues to be a fantastic 200-foot player as well. He's durable. He played in all 82 games for the third consecutive season, and I also think Suzuki deserves quite a bit of credit for the emergence of Juraj Slafkovsky during the second half. When Marty St. Louis put Slafkovsky with Suzuki and Caulfield, there was no looking back. Those three were dynamite together. Suzuki is one of those players that makes everyone around him better, and I think that was evident during the second half, and man, I feel like that line, Suzuki, Slafkovsky, and Caulfield, has the potential to be one of the best lines in the league for a long time. Next up at number 23, I have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres, who was really the sole reason why the Buffalo Sabres were even in the mix for one of those wildcard spots during the last month of the season. Luukkonen appeared in a career-high 54 games this season, had a record of 27, 22, and 4, a .910 save percentage, and was 6th in the entire NHL in goals saved above expected. This is exactly the kind of goaltending that the Buffalo Sabres were missing last season when they had one of the best offenses in the league. This season, the roles were just kind of reversed. The offense is really what let them down, and the defense and goaltending was really a strong point for the Buffalo Sabres this year. Next season, if they can find a way to just get everything clicking at once, this team has the potential to be very dangerous. Moving on now to number 22, some people may disagree with me having him this high, but I have Connor Bedard of the Chicago Blackhawks, the likely Calder Trophy winner from this season. Despite playing in just 68 games due to that jaw injury, Connor Bedard led the Blackhawks in points with 61. He was 7 points clear of the second highest leading scorer on the team, which was Philip Kurashev. At just 18 years old, putting up the kind of numbers Bedard put up offensively with the supporting cast that he had on the Blackhawks this season is incredibly impressive. I said this on the channel before and I'll say it again here. I think him going down with that jaw injury and missing some time actually helped his Calder Trophy case, because if you watched any Blackhawks games during that period of time Connor Bedard was out of the lineup, which I don't know why anyone would unless you're a diehard Blackhawks fan, but like that team could not do anything offensively, and then all of a sudden they get Bedard back into the lineup, Bubble Bedard comes back and just starts popping off. Bedard really was responsible for so much of the Chicago Blackhawks offense this season. I just cannot wait to see what this guy's going to be able to do once the Blackhawks actually start to build a competitive team around him. Continuing on now at number 21, I have Jesper Bratt as the MVP of the New Jersey Devils. I think you could definitely make a case for Nico Hischier. If Jack Hughes was healthy all season long, I feel like this spot obviously would have went to him, but I decided to go with Jesper Bratt, who had a fantastic season, a career-high 83 points in 82 games, the first time in his career that he's finished a season above a point per game. Jesper Bratt has unbelievable vision. I think he's one of the more underrated playmakers in the NHL. Sure, it was a disappointing season for the New Jersey Devils as a team, but I don't think anyone in the Devils organization or any Devils fans could be mad at the effort put forth by Jesper Bratt this season. He was great. Getting into the top 20 now, at number 20, I have Lucas Raymond as the MVP for the Detroit Red Wings. Is there some recency bias here? I think so for sure. But man, when Dylan Larkin went down with that injury and the Red Wings were going through that brutal stretch towards the end of the season that really took them out of the playoffs, Lucas Raymond was the one doing everything in his power to drag this team out of the mud, coming up clutch time and time again, especially in those final 2 games of the season against the Montreal Canadiens, game 81 especially, tying the game with the empty net and then scoring the overtime winner. Lucas Raymond was an absolute monster for Detroit down the stretch, and he came up big and stepped up when they needed somebody to step up. He finished with career highs across the board, 31 goals, 41 assists, 72 points. Even though the season ended in just a brutal, disappointing way for the Red Wings, I think Wings fans should be really encouraged by what they saw from Lucas Raymond, who again just continued to come up big for them time and time again in big moments, and that's what you want to see from young players. At number 19, I have Jonathan Marchessault as the MVP for the Vegas Golden Knights, a team that dealt with a lot of injuries to key players throughout the season, but Jonathan Marchessault was one of the few constants in the lineup and producing every night. He appeared in all 82 games and carried over his momentum from that monstrous playoff run last year to this year's regular season. He scored a career high 42 goals, 34 of which came at even strength, which was 7th best in the entire NHL. Big time performance this season from Jonathan Marchessault for a Vegas team that at times this season it looked like they were in danger of missing the postseason, and they probably would have had it not been for Jonathan Marchessault playing as well as he did. At number 18, I have Robert Thomas as the MVP from the St. Louis Blues. He had a monster season, finishing with a career high 86 points in 82 games. He was 19 points clear of the second highest leading scorer on the Blues, who was Jordan Kyrou with 67. Over these last few seasons, Robert Thomas really has blossomed into one of the premier playmaking centers in the entire league. He was 12th this season in even strength primary assists, and he did that on a Blues team that was just 24th in the NHL in goals for per game. Really impressive year from Robert Thomas. He was far and away the best player on a St. Louis Blues team that really exceeded my expectations this year. They only missed out on the playoffs by 6 points. Moving on now to number 17, I decided to go with Miro Heiskanen as the MVP from the Dallas Stars. I think you could definitely make a case for a couple other different players on Dallas. They're a team that's definitely not carried by any one player. In the case of Miro Heiskanen, his offensive numbers did come down quite a bit from last season, where he put up a career high 73 points, but he still finished this season with 54, averaged over 24.5 minutes of ice time per game, and he's somebody that really dominated in all areas of the ice for the Dallas Stars. He's one of the absolute best all-around defensemen in the NHL. At times I feel like he's overlooked because he might not, put up the 90-plus point seasons that guys like Erik Karlsson and Quinn Hughes and Roman Josi are capable of doing, but in terms of just a complete all-around game and somebody who can help their team in pretty much every area, there isn't many better than Miro Heiskanen. At number 16, I have Anze Kopitar as the MVP for the Los Angeles Kings. They're another team like Dallas, not really carried by any one player. I think you could make a case for a couple different players, but I decided to go with Anze Kopitar, who at 36 years old just continues to age like a fine wine. He finished 3rd on the LA Kings in points this season with 70 in 81 games, continues to be a fantastic 200-foot player, and in my opinion, he's really the engine that runs this LA Kings team. At this point in his career, he may not be the quickest or most flashy player, but he thinks the game incredibly well, really high hockey IQ, and he makes a big impact for the LA Kings in tons of different areas. At number 15, I have Kirill Kaprizov as the MVP from the Minnesota Wild. Despite kind of a slow start to the season for his standards, he was still able to finish with 96 points in 75 games. He is one of the absolute best pound-for-pound offensive players in the entire NHL. He finished 27 points clear of the second highest scorer on the Wild this season, who was Matt Boldy with 69 points. Kaprizov carries a massive workload for the Minnesota Wild as really their only elite play driver. The dude is just a dominant force offensively, and despite his best efforts this season, it just unfortunately wasn't enough to drag the Wild to the playoffs kicking and screaming. Speaking of dragging a team into the playoffs kicking and screaming, at number 14, I have Charlie Lindgren as the MVP for the Washington Capitals. What a season from Charlie Lindgren, who really took the reins as the starting goaltender for the Washington Capitals, and if it wasn't for him, this team would not have been anywhere close to a playoff spot, let alone make the playoffs. Lindgren finished the season with a record of 25, 16, and 7, a .911 save percentage, a 2.67 goals against average, and he finished 9th in the NHL in goals saved above expected. Despite rarely ever getting a lot of goal support from the Washington Capitals, Charlie Lindgren just consistently found a way to steal wins for the Capitals. This team finished 28th in the NHL in goals for per game, and they find themselves in the playoffs. playoffs. I think I've seen a stat that they only scored 9 goals in their last 6 games of the season, but thanks to Charlie Lindgren stealing games where he would allow 0 goals or 1 goal, the Capitals were able to pull off something that I don't think anybody expected was possible, 2-3 months ago, and that is make the playoffs, especially after they sold at the deadline. Moving along now to number 13, I have Noah Dobson as the MVP from the New York Islanders. What an explosive season from Noah Dobson, a career-high 70 points in 79 games. Over these last couple of years, he really has blossomed into a legit number 1 defenseman for the New York Islanders, and he's putting up these kinds of numbers offensively on an Islanders team that has notoriously been known as a team to struggle offensively. They finished just 22nd in the NHL this season in goals for per game, so getting 70 points from the back end goes a long way. In my opinion, he was definitely their MVP this season and is a massive reason why they were able to make the playoffs, not just as a wildcard team, but as a divisional seed in the Metro. Moving along now to number 12, I have Sebastian Aho as the MVP from the Carolina Hurricanes, the best player on one of the absolute best teams in the league. Aho finished this season with a career-high 89 points in 78 games. I think he plays an underrated 200-foot game as well, just really a complete all-around player for Carolina. I feel like everyone's still kind of waiting for him to have that dominant postseason run. At times, the offense has kind of dried up for him in the playoffs, and I think there's a good chance we could see that from Sebastian Aho this year, because I think this is the best supporting cast he's had as a member of the Carolina Hurricanes. That team is stacked. At number 11, I have Roman Josi as the MVP from the Nashville Predators. You can definitely make a strong case for Philip Forsberg as well. Take your pick. Both of them were absolute superstars this season for Nashville. Another 23-goal season from Roman Josi, which is just absolutely absurd. 85 points, the second highest point total he's finished a season with in his career. The last few months of the regular season were really just complete and utter dominance from Roman Josi. Cannot say enough good things about him. One of the best defensemen that the NHL has to offer. I don't think he's going to win the Norris this year, because I think it's going to go to someone who we're going to talk about in a little bit, but he should definitely be in the conversation. Next up at number 10 is the player that I think will end up winning the Norris over Roman Josi, and that is Quinn Hughes, defenseman and captain of the Vancouver Canucks. Hughes took his game to a whole other level this season. He ended up leading all defensemen in points with 92 in 82 games, and I know the Norris Trophy shouldn't always just go to the defenseman that leads the NHL in points by a defenseman, but it's not just Quinn Hughes' offensive output that he took to another level this season, it's really his entire game. Improved in so many different areas, the defensive end especially. He has been great all season long defensively for Vancouver. This is not a guy who should just be recognized as an offensive defenseman. He plays a complete game. He dominates for Vancouver in all areas. Is he the most physical? No, but he doesn't need to be, because of how talented he is, because of how good he is with the puck, his skating. He's able to evade forecheckers, and he really established himself this season as a threat to score as well, which I think improved Vancouver's power play and just made him that much more dangerous. He had never scored double digits in a season prior to this season, and this year he finished with 17. Just an unbelievable all-around year for Quinn Hughes. He's my Norris Trophy pick, and he deserves a ton of credit for the kind of season that Vancouver had as a team as well. Moving along now to number 9, I have Sam Reinhart as the MVP of the Florida Panthers. Definitely think you can make a strong case for Barkov as well. I decided to go with Reinhart though, who really just exploded this season. 57 goals and 94 points, played in all 82 games. On top of his insane offensive output, Sam Reinhart is one of the absolute best 200-foot players in the entire NHL. He plays on both and is elite on both special teams. Obviously did a ton of his damage in terms of goal scoring on the power play in that bumper position. Sam Reinhart, easily one of the most valuable players in the entire NHL this season, which just sounds pretty crazy to say. I mean, we all knew he was a good top 6 forward, but I don't think anyone knew he was capable of being this good. Next up at number 8, this may be too low for some people, but I feel like that just speaks to how insane the Hart Trophy race was this season. I have Sidney Crosby. Sidney Crosby played in all 82 games for the second consecutive season and scored 42 goals, his highest goal scoring season since back in 2016-17. He had 94 points, and down the stretch had one of the best, stretches of play, not just like recently, but in his entire career. He did everything he possibly could to try and drag the Penguins to the playoffs. Unfortunately, just came up short, but you have to imagine if the Penguins were able to get in, Crosby was going to get some Hart Trophy votes without a doubt. Moving on now to number 7, I have David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins. Another season for Pastrnak in which he scored 110 or more points. A game-breaking talent offensively in every sense of the word. He finished 43 points clear of the second highest leading scorer on the Bruins this season, which was Brad Marchand with 67 points. Complete and utter dominance this season from David Pastrnak. A lot of people wrote off Boston coming into this season. I was one of those people, I'll admit it. With all the firepower they lost offensively in the offseason, I was a little bit worried about their depth. You know, if it wasn't the top line scoring, where was the offense going to come from? Turns out, all you need is David Pastrnak and a couple of elite goaltenders, and you're going to be just fine. Next up at number 6, I have Artemi Panarin of the New York Rangers. Artemi Panarin led the Rangers to one of their best regular seasons in franchise history. They won the President's Trophy. Panarin broke the 100-point mark for the very first time in his career, which is pretty surprising, but man, he didn't just break it, he shattered it. 120 points. Just like David Pastrnak, he also finished 43 points clear of the second highest leading scorer on the Rangers, who was Vincent Trocheck with 77. It almost feels criminal to have someone who put up these kinds of numbers on the best team in the league during the regular season at just number 6 in these rankings. But again, that just speaks to how insanely talented the NHL is and how crazy the Hart Trophy race was. This regular season really was absurd. Getting into the top 5 now. At number 5, I have Connor Hellebuyck, goaltender of the Winnipeg Jets. Originally, I had him ranked below both Pastrnak and Panarin. Honestly, I think they're all interchangeable. In my opinion, Connor Hellebuyck is the Vezina Trophy winner this season. I would be shocked if he doesn't win it, and I think he deserves some Hart Trophy love as well. He backstopped the Winnipeg Jets to one of their most successful regular seasons in NHL history. Sure, the team defense was definitely much improved, but it obviously helps to have arguably the best goaltender in the NHL on your team, and it feels like year after year after year, Connor Hellebuyck continues to just put together Vezina caliber seasons. Hellebuyck finished first in the entire NHL this season in goals saved above expected, and using Evolving Hockey's model, he saved 39.35 goals saved above expected. Just for reference of how insane that is, Jordan Binnington was second with 29.74, so Hellebuyck almost 10 more. Next up at number 4, I have Connor McDavid of the Edmonton Oilers, who despite having a pretty slow start to the season for his standards, still managed to finish with 100 assists. 100 assists. That just sounds absurd to even say. I'm not even sure what else I'm supposed to say about Connor McDavid that hasn't already been said. A generational talent who just continues to dominate the NHL year after year, and it seems like just when you think like, okay, that has to be, you know, his peak, he can't get any better, right? He does, and he manages to do something even more insane or put up even more insane numbers. Getting into the top 3 now. At number 3, I have Austin Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs. 69 goals, 107 points in 81 games. I wanted him to hit 70 so bad. I don't really think one goal makes much of a difference, though 69 is still pretty damn impressive. I don't even think there's much of a debate at this point. Austin Matthews is the best pound for pound goal scorer in the NHL. I know a lot of people like to, you know, make fun, oh, 38 assists, there's no way someone with 38 assists can be a Hart Trophy candidate, and to that I say, sure there is. You just have to be a generational goal scorer, score almost 70, and, you know, still be an elite 200-foot player as well. Next up at number 2, I have Nikita Kucherov of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I really do feel like it is a 2-horse race at this point, and the 2 most likely candidates are Kucherov and McKinnon, who, you know, spoiler alert, is my number 1. In my opinion, you really can't go wrong here, and whoever ends up winning the Hart, they're definitely going to deserve it. Kucherov led the entire NHL in points this season, winning his second Art Ross trophy. Like McDavid, 100 assists for Kucherov. Absolutely absurd numbers. 54 points clear of the second highest leading scorer on the Lightning, who is Braden Point with 90. Just an unreal season from start to finish. Kucherov could not be stopped. I feel like we all thought it was crazy that he put up 128 points back in 2018-19, and now here at 30 years old, he's putting up 140 plus, which is just nuts. And now finally, finishing out the video at number 1, like I said, spoiler alert, it is Nathan McKinnon. He is my pick to win the Hart Trophy this season. McKinnon played in all 82 games, scored 51 goals, and had 140 points, finishing just 4 back of Kucherov in the race for the Art Ross. I feel like when it comes to the top Hart Trophy candidates this season, they were all kind of chasing their own history. You had Kucherov and McDavid chasing the 100 assist milestone, Matthews chasing 70 goals. And in the case of Nathan McKinnon, he was trying to get a point in every home game, which he didn't end up doing. I was rooting for him. It would have been crazy to see him pull something like that off. I'll say the same thing about McKinnon as I said about McDavid, and it really applies to a lot of the players I've talked about really in the top 5. Like, what do you say about McKinnon that hasn't already been said, that people already don't know? Just complete and utter dominance from McKinnon this season. It's so fun to watch, just such an explosive player, and he's one of those players that really ups his game when the lights are the brightest as well. I know the Hart Trophy is a regular season award, but McKinnon, man, 1.3 points per game in his playoff career. That is the 6th best of all time. Just insane. So that is going to wrap up today's today's video ranking the most valuable player from all 32 NHL teams this season. Remember, when it comes to these kinds of videos, these lists are completely subjective. These are just my opinions, and I will say it was pretty difficult to like rank from like 32 up until 12, I'll say. Like all that in the middle stuff, it's kind of hard to rank those guys because we know they're not actually Hart Trophy candidates. But I still thought this video would be a fun way to give my take on the Hart Trophy debate and also, you know, touch on all 32 NHL teams, which I know are some of your guys' favorite videos. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like this on the channel in the future, like I mentioned at the beginning, be sure to leave the video a like. That is the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want NHL content just like this all year round, and I will talk to you all again soon.